Okay, thank you all for coming. We are going to, I will call the New Hartford Public Schools special meeting at 5 PM on Tuesday, March 4th to order. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me if you are able. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, again, thank you for coming. Next item is order of business. I have no changes to the order of business for tonight. And next item is communication to the Board of Education and public comment. Do we have any communication since last week?
No.
So we have no communications to the board since last week. Public comment is open. Would anybody like to address the board? All right, seeing none, we will move on to item D, Superintendent's report.
Thank you so much, Chairman Kleps. Just want to start off with some quick updates. District-wide, March 7th, we have Spirit Day. Make sure you wear your red. We have a follow-up budget workshop coming up on March the 11th, right here at Antolini at 6 p.m. for our budget workshop series. On March the 14th, we have early dismissal for professional development. And on March 18th, we have a follow-up Board of Education workshop meeting here at Antolini scheduled for 7 p.m. On March the 19th through the 20th, we have 1 p.m. dismissal as we have our favorite parent-teacher conferences. So our parents and families will be in the buildings meeting with our teachers. And on March 27th, an exciting day, that's our preschool play group. So it's screening day for new preschool students. More information, including the screening form, is located in our Friday folder. And last but not least, March 28th, there is no school for students as we are engaged in professional development at the end of the month. All right. Up next, I want to pivot to our current budget that we are in now, which is the 24-25 budget with some projections. And I want to just pass this out for everyone to have a copy of, please. 2, 3, 4, and 5. And if we just take one and pass those around as well. All right, up on the screen, I have the same sheet that is in front of the Board of Education and want to give everyone an update regarding the current budget that we are fiscally living in. Currently, we have some unexpected or unanticipated or frankly unpredictable costs to our budget. If you asked me last year where we were, if we could predict these costs accurately for the budget that we are in now, it would be close to impossible. We have incurred significant legal fees relative to, number one, prolonged negotiations over the course of the summer and into the fall season. So that is one element. The second one is a confidential legal matter relative to a student and family. So that is one element. Now that piece we can cover with a lot of our overages and make do with that component. The other that was unpredictable is related to our outplacement costs. Again, these are number one, unpredictable. Students may come to us transiently from another district or within our own district that need additional support and services which are not offered here within our public schools for the nature of their outplacement. It's very specific and specified through a PPT process. And those students, once they are outplaced, we constantly have meetings with the outplacement facilities and ensure that we are setting goals for students to return to us when they can. And the second component of the special education deficit there is also because of our unfunded grants through the state of Connecticut, most specifically the excess cost grant, of which I've written to our legislature, and I will continue to do so to the appropriations committee. That was a grant that was unfunded by approximately $40,000. So those are the elements that are leading to the following action across our district. We are taking a budget freeze so that we have a deficit projection at the end of the year of approximately $50,000 to $60,000. And the plan there would be to meet weekly with our central office team and our leadership team as we do, and then look again in April to see if we could ease the budget freeze. But currently with the condition that we are in, we need to institute a budget freeze to ensure that we are being as fiscally minded as we can and to offset as much as we can by the end of the year. So we'll project right now to be 56,330, but that's an approximate number by the end of the school year. That's why we are immediately engaged in a budget freeze. So wanted to provide this now for the board to see, also to state this publicly, and followed up with information to our administrative staff to communicate that right now there are no purchases permitted unless they are for the health and safety of our students, unless they're absolute needs. So there'll be further scrutiny upon any purchases. So that's where we are at right now in this current budget that we are living in. Any questions relative to the condition we're in or the actions or the proposed plan?
What makes up the 130,000 for Board of Ed? Is that legal?
Legal fees specifically, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you know about how much for legal fees?
That's the projection of where we'll be by the
It's
end.
130,000.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. And again, these are best estimates based on new bills that we receive for varying conditions that are changing for our students that are outplaced, and also for our legal fees.
Jeff, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Are we allowed to ask questions right now?
Yeah, of course.
So the 130 is the legal fees, for example, from like the negotiations? And what else is it?
The other is relative to a confidential student matter.
Okay, and how much is that, like, how much is legal fees from like the negotiations and
I
stuff?
could
Do
break
you
that down
know?
and give it to you further. I was just providing a
Yeah,
roll-up
no, it's
versus
totally
all
fine. I'm
the,
just curious, you don't have.
I don't have
it's
it
not a
off the top of my
priority,
head.
but That's,
Yeah.
but what the two buckets are?
that's correct.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Of course. Yes, Tom?
Can you get that for us for next week?
Mhm.
For that?
Sure. I could break it down further for you if you'd like. Yep,
Yeah, just the 2 buckets. Thank you.
of course. All right, seeing no other questions, what is the next budget or the,
Next
Agenda
item is
item.
the Board of Education Chairs Report.
Okay.
And really, I should turn this on. Under the Board of Education Chairs Report, first, again, we're here in our second session looking at our 25-26 proposed budget from our superintendent. I want to thank everybody on the board for the time you've put in between last meeting and this meeting. Again, as we get into item G under new business, which is our budget discussion for tonight, I know that everybody put a lot of time in reviewing the budget, asking questions. Again, some very good questions came in, but I want to make sure that I thank everybody for their time doing that. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment. The next item is routine business for the expenditure report that was in the packet. Can I get a motion to approve the expenditure report?
Can I make a suggestion that we table that until our next meeting so that we can just devote this meeting to our proposed budget for next year?
We could. Are there any comments, or I guess if we can get are there any comments or questions? Do you have comments and questions on the expenditure report?
Well, I haven't gone through it entirely, but I
Okay.
did have some questions,
Okay.
and I was just hoping we could.
I'm okay tabling. You have any reason not to? Does anybody have any reason not to table?
Do you
All right.
need a
I
motion?
need a motion to table, please.
I'll make a motion that we table the expenditure report until our next regular meeting?
Yes, that would be on March 18th.
Okay, until March 18th.
All right, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. That passes unanimously. Okay, moving to really the meat of today's meeting, which is our 25-26 budget discussion and action. As I said, under the Board of Education Chairs Report, again, I thank you all for your time. We had a total of questions that were submitted through me that I compiled and brought to Jeff of about 70 questions, just shy of 70 questions that came through. A little bit different than what we had last year. Last year, we had around 140 questions that were asked. But at that time, again, we did have 4 new board members. So again, we would expect that there would be a lot more questions last year. Now that we have get a better understanding of the budget, we expected some less this year. So having 70 questions is actually quite a few. We've compiled them into a spreadsheet with all the questions and comments and with the responses and answers that our superintendent has provided us. These will become part of the meeting minutes of today's meeting for public viewing. And with that, again, I think we want to go through a couple of the highlights of the questions and answers, just to, again, talk about the main drivers of the budget this year.
Absolutely. Again, thank you again, Chairman Clips, and everybody that provided questions in advance, so we could get and seek further clarity regarding our budgetary process and the challenges and the drivers that are set before us as a Board of Education here in New Hartford. So a great thanks to Chairman Kleps for developing this system. This, I think, worked very, very efficiently with every single line item and providing opportunity for every board member to participate in the process and to engage in our budgetary process, like I said. Secondly, I'd like to thank my central office team that assisted with any specifics, details that were necessary throughout the entire document, and also the leadership team that's sitting before us here as well. So thank you to all of the team that made all of the responses happen and be as clear as possible. All right, so some of the themes that we found throughout the document are a couple. Number one is comparisons to other districts and comparison to even Regional 7. So I provided further clarity what that looks like. Really comparing to regional is very difficult. That is 4 different feeders. There's different assessment. It's not really comparing apples to apples there, but I did provide that information, and a more relevant comparison is more of a Pew Purple expense. So you'll see there that New Hartford's in 23-24 was $23,000 and regional is $27,000, just demonstrating our efficiency with the monies that we have and what we offer our students. We also wanted to just make sure that we're reflective of COLA being over a 2-year, because we're currently living in one inflationary year and, you know, going into another. So I provided that type of information. And then there are other particulars, you know, question number 10 and 11 where, you know, has there been an examination or an exploration of looking into having significant cost savings by consolidating? I've responded in both appropriately. I believe that this would really take a year-long study, as is state statute. When you're typically discussing or thinking about a regionalization, that involves a process, and that is typically a year-long exploratory process to attain a lot of information before making those types of moves. Other drivers here, and I'll be presenting them on the board just shortly, are contractual obligations. So through our bargaining units, through our good faith bargaining and our recent negotiations, we have contractual obligations. So I'll be demonstrating those for both certified and non-certified. We also have healthcare costs that are, again, non-negotiable pieces. Those are our costs and what they are to provide medical insurance, dental, vision for all of our employees and their families, should they choose to engage in that or take advantage of that. And also the larger driver is, again, our outplacement costs, which are special education costs, and I'll have those projected for you up on the board in just a moment. Outside of that, those were the main pieces that came from this. There were other simple questions regarding, you know, is this belong in the right line? Or, hey, I've noticed this currently in this budget, we haven't spent that money down. It just means we haven't paid that bill for whatever that particular element is. That's what that is. So again, great kudos to the board, great keen eye on every element of the board. There are so many line items in our approximately $10 million budget to take a look at. So again, I appreciate all of the questions. On the sheet of paper that I did hand out to the board, on the backside, you'll see the 25-26 budget drivers. And this is really where I want to focus the board's energies on, because out of the $871,000 original request, which reflected an 8.86 increase to the budget, these pieces that I'll project on the board just shortly that you have on the back, these pieces here that are projected and that the board has behind them really reflect the non-negotiable elements of what we are engaged in. So even taking this into consideration, you'll see employee salaries. This is inclusive of every employee that we have, whether you're a certified educator, administrator, director, teacher, and then the non-certified custodians, lead secretary positions, you know, throughout our district, para-educators, and others. That total combined number is $220,000, which right out the gate, you could see we're at 2.5% of an increase. Next, we have employee benefits, which again are higher than they've been in the past, but they are approximately 11% this year, which is reflective of approximately $153,000. Again, 1.5% of the budget. And these are those elements that are out of our control. I don't have, you know, the ability to say, I'll save money by doing X, Y, or Z in these particular areas. without, again, impacting the way that we deliver education to our children now. These are our employed certified and non-certified. These are the benefits that we provide them. And then our most sensitive and neediest of students, we have outplacements which are going to be increasing by $290,000 at a percentage rate of 3.3%. If you just add these up, we're at a 7.6 or $663,000 out of the original requested $871,000. The remainder obviously is transportation, legal, and other elements, plant operations to our school district. So that makes up that remainder, about approximately $208,000 left over there. But without focusing on these elements, we're really not going to be able to cut anything or enough to get us down to something that's more appetizing to the Board of Education. So I wanted to, again, summarize all of the questions that we received, looked carefully at all of these elements, provided those responses. Further things can be evaluated. But if the board's intent is to cut, then the only way that we're going to get there is to really take a focus on this, which means that individuals will no longer be able to be employed by the New Hartford Public Schools. That's where we get down to it, okay? But depending on the remainder of the discussion, if I could answer anything else, again, applaud the board for giving me all of these questions, and Chairman Kleps for providing such a great format to do so and to give us that information and put it before the board so that we could start having that dialogue and discussion, and then see what we could do for next week as well as we meet on Tuesday.
I have a question.
Yes.
So the 7.60, the stuff that's up there, that's already the increase that we're already going to have. And then you added on the extra stuff that gets us to the 8.86.
Correct.
So that stuff, we have to do this. We're already at a 7.60.
Yeah, the only way that this changes is, again, with these individuals not being employed by New Hartford Public Schools, because then you drop the salary, you drop the benefit per individual, and we're going to try to do that with the least impact on students. It's a very challenging position for the board, obviously, to be in.
So what we'd like to do now is we'd like to open it up to the full board again with the questions and the responses we received from our superintendent. First, are there any follow-ups to any of the questions that are on here? Does everybody had the opportunity to review these, see the answers? Again, I did review these with Jeff last night, so we went through some of these to make sure that we had the appropriate answers in here that would inform the board, right, to be able to have a full understanding of what's encapsulated in this 2025, 2026 superintendent proposed budget. So we'll open it up for any questions, please.
Jeff, what's the total number again of the grants that we're not receiving this year?
That we're not receiving?
Correct.
Okay, so the 24-25 budget, we are currently underfunded by $40,000 specifically to the excess cost grant.
2024 to 2025, we're not getting 40K.
Correct.
And then that's it? That's the only?
That's for this current fiscal
Okay,
year,
so
yes.
what's for next year we're not getting?
Next year, I don't know yet.
But what are you anticipating?
We're anticipating receiving approximately $434,000 in federal and Connecticut funding.
Okay.
That's the REAP grant, Title I, Title II, Title IV. All of them are listed on page number 5 of our budget book.
But you're not guaranteed that? You're just
No, those are our,
anticipating-
correct, those
that's
are our
projection
projections.
Based on what?
Based on what the current figures have been looking historically at what we've received. Every single one of those grants has a different formula to them. Some are relative to poverty, others are relative to the fact that we have rural education opportunities here because we're in the northwest corner. So all of them have different criteria and are formulated or funded differently. So without knowing all of those elements, if those are going to be cut within the federal government or cut within Connecticut state legislature, these are the projections that we have currently to help offset all of our costs in the budget.
And when do you know when you'll get those?
They vary. So sometimes we get some in the summertime. Other times we receive them right at the onset of the school year because we're already in past July 1. We're in that next fiscal school year for us. That's when we get those answers typically. More specifics, if the team wants to contribute, any other grant timelines? If not, that's typically when we get the answer, specific answers for each grant.
And one of those grants for next year that we are losing is the grant that we're using for
CJR.
CJR.
That is correct. Yep, that's not listed here any longer.
That's 35, right?
It was $35,000 or more, right, Michael? Yeah, thank you.
So of the delta that we have that's not shown on this piece of paper here or on the screen, of that 207 is $35,000 just for CJR, correct?
Correct. Yep, because that is not a contractual obligation. That is an optional piece that the board can offer, and we have offered for the past several years. And then there's a continuum of CJR also at regional number 7 for us. And that's, again, available to all students, regardless of special ed or not. And that's the cost that it would be for us to have the individual, that's the portion of their salary that we would pay for them to be available to us to provide in-school counseling. So again, when there's challenges outside of the school day, because parents are working or other things of that nature, CJR is available in the school to provide that counseling. And also that $35,000 allows us to have 1 or 2 days of mental health support in our schools. 1 day, thank you, Michael.
One day you're saying?
1 day, yeah. So 4 days of CJR counseling in school, 1 day of mental health support for our kiddos here in New Hartford.
And we're losing that for the 2025, 2026 budget, or we're losing for the 24, 25?
24, 25, we have it.
Right.
25, 26, we no longer have it. That's why it's a projected cost at $35,000.
But that's not included in the 434. or
No,
is it?
because we don't have that grant any longer for next year. That's
So,
correct.
Of that 434,000 that you're projecting for next year, does that also include the 40,000 we didn't get this year?
Which 40,000?
You're
What
talking
did,
excess cost?
You said,
The excess cost, we didn't get 40,000 this year.
oh,
you said of the grants that we didn't get. where
for
you-
this year? Mhm.
Is 40,000.
Yep.
So in the 434, is that 40,000 in there? And well,
That's,
okay, let me put it this way. We got the $40,000 for this year. So we hired people for those grants, no?
no, we did not get $40,000. The excess cost grant is relative to student outplacement and tuition and transportation. So it's based on a very complex formula that we know how to calculate pretty well. It's not that we don't know how to calculate it, it's that the state doesn't fund it fully when
Right.
they say they would. This year, they have underfunded us at approximately $40,000. Next year, we're again projecting this to be low, but we can't predict with precision how much they're going to underfund us or overfund. That'll be a miracle for next year.
So just, again, to bring that home, 24, 25, what percentage of the excess cost formula did we carry in our budget?
We carried
Approximately.
approximately 40 to 50% of it.
And in our current
And we were
budget for
short.
25, 26
Yep.
proposed, what is our percentage?
This one would be approximately, well, no, so sorry, for this current, about 60%. And then again, for next year, about 58 to 59%.
So you dropped the
Yeah.
expected recovery to be more conservative than the formula would tell us.
Correct. Yep. We've only received, again, we were supposed to receive 130,000 at their onset projections. They've provided us with $87,000, or we will be receiving $87,000.
So what that means is our current budget is getting more conservative because of what we're learning
Mhm.
year after year after year.
That's correct.
I have one more question. With the 43 million that's getting vetoed for special education in the state of Connecticut, what is that impact on us?
18,000.
So we only get 18,000?
That was originally, so they've
Allocated?
never fully funded the 130. They gave us 87. The $40 million that was just recently vetoed by line item by Governor Lamont meant that New Hartford Public Schools will not receive $18,000 of that originally promised 130,000, for
So
example.
where is that reflected in the budget?
That's reflected in the budget projections for this current fiscal year that we're
That
living in.
18,000 that's missing is reflected in here, right? Okay, got it.
It's 40,000.
I'm sorry, 40, but
Total.
they've
It was
only,
40, it was 40,000 and then the
Then they said
legislature put another
18,000. Now it's-
40 million on the table.
Mhm.
We would have got 18 if that
Correct.
40 million was passed. The governor vetoed the 40 million, so we're not even going to get 18. Any other follow-up questions on the questions asked and the responses, or any new questions?
Is there an anticipated per pupil expenditure for next year? What would the total be for that?
No, those are typically generated after we submit our October 1st, so that we don't have that projection right now.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
We have to submit that information to the Connecticut State Department of Ed, and then they produce that per pupil expense.
I see that we're the lowest in the
Yeah, we are.
region.
Yeah, we're very
Yeah.
efficient with that.
You know, and in addition to that too, is one of the questions that was asked, right, just to highlight is the staff to student ratio. And when you compare us to the surrounding communities around us, again, we are in line with, was it Barkhamsted? Yeah, we are in line with Barkhamsted at 9-1, and then we were higher than Colebrook, Norfolk. And that, again, is based on 90 staff members. So we're in line with surrounding areas as well with our staff to student ratio, student to staff ratio, I should say. You know, and again, a couple other things to point out is, you know, we are providing special education services to over a quarter of our student population, which is up from last year, right? That's also noted in these notes. And then our outplacement, again, at an average cost of $180,000, right, for each student we outplace. So we all have our work cut out for us, right? Looking at these budget numbers, looking at a over 8% increase against 7.6% contractual. We know that with any cut that we make is going to be a change to the learning environment we produce today, right? Or we provide today to our community. So again, our goal tonight is to give our superintendent a direction in order for us to be able to make a decision by our next meeting on the 11th, a week from today. So I don't know if anybody has any thoughts to start the discussion, Tom?
So since I'm not an expert in education, and I can only leave it up to Jeff and his staff, I can't recommend making individual line item cuts because I'm not sure how that would affect the staff or our students. You guys know that better than I do, but in order for us to evaluate where we need to be, I would like to see your recommendations to bring this budget down to 3 different levels that we can look at that and at least have the conversation start from there. So I'm thinking 5.5%, 5% and 4.5% increases, so we can look at what those cuts look like and how they affect, and we can make a better decision rather than going through each and tell you to cut $100,000 here and $50,000 there. That's more your decision making than mine. That's where my thought lies right now.
It's open discussion. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I agree with Tom. But I would say instead of kind of wasting your time with the 5.5, just to do like a 4 and a 5 for us, just because I don't think the 5.5 is gonna go.
If we do that, we're going to have to cut teachers. So my question is, what's the maximum class size we have here in this district?
So currently, it would be 25-1. We have set guidelines that the Board of Education has in place as one of our policies. I could revisit that and take a look at that as well. But contractually, we're looking at 25-1 would be or 25, yeah, would be our max class size, which, as you know, as an educator, has significant ramifications in terms of the
Absolutely.
ability to meet the needs of all of the kiddos when we're used to class sizes of approximately, what's our average here?
16.8.
Yeah, it's about 17
Yep.
per class. So we're looking at an additional 6 to 8 kids per class would have a significant impact on the way that we are educating our kiddos.
If we do have to go to the employee salaries and look at staff cuts, have you guys ever, this is for the whole board, have you ever used any kind of retirement incentive or anything like that to, because I think attrition is a way better way to lose staff than to fire somebody. Have you guys ever looked at that kind of a thing? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. I don't know historically, so I would let others that have been on the board longer than I have. I don't have any record
Since
of
I've
that.
been here, I'm not aware of incentivizing retirement.
Aerial security is approximately the price of one teacher. Is that something we'd consider getting rid of for next year?
I think it has to be on the table, in my opinion.
You asked about attrition this is my 12th year now being on this board. I don't recall in those 12 years we ever using attrition to bring down
I'm just talking about if somebody leaves, you don't rehire.
right.
You don't hire a replacement.
But I mean, there's never been like the conversation of, you're getting close to the end of, I don't want to say your lifetime, but you're getting close to the end of your school teaching life. Have you considered, I don't ever recall that conversation coming up.
I've seen it happen at our school where they may offer something like a year of insurance or something like that to incentivize it, retirement. And it's appealing to some
Right.
people who are getting close to the end of their
But you
career
have to
funds.
realize, in the 12 years I've been here, in the beginning of the 12 years, they didn't have this much discussion about the budget. It's only in the past, I'd say 6 years, that the budget has really been discussed.
I'm
I
gonna throw my 2 cents on backing up what you said, that it's also, speaking of attrition, I would rather just not hire someone that's not here already than to lose a teacher.
Especially considering all of the fantastic security improvements we've made already. Whether it be the windows or the doors or security cameras.
Yeah, I think that was an item that came up in here, and it's an item that the response was it can be evaluated. Right, so it's on the list of question comments.
One other thing, not that I want to take away any teachers, and there's always a chance that somebody retires at the end of the year, somebody leaves at the end of the year. But I do notice that the next year's 4th grade has 4 sections, yet they have the same number of students as the 6th grade. Is 4th grade, is that a grade that's can be condensed to 3 sections rather than 4? Not something I want, absolutely not. But if we're talking
Can you,
about,
would you mind repeating that? What are
so
you
the
looking at?
projected,
Fourth grade.
the projected class size for grade 4 is 16.3, 65 students total. Grade 6 also has 65 students total, and they have 3 sections as opposed to 4. So what that would do is if we eliminated a section in grade 4, that would bring their class size up to 21.7, just like 6th grade. And of course, as a teacher, I do not wish that to happen, but if something has to be cut, that could be an option. 21.7, 22 students is manageable in a classroom, especially an upper grade classroom, 4th through 6. I understand you wouldn't want that many in a primary grade, but a 4th through 6 might be doable.
So that would be something that, of course, we can look at and evaluate. New Hartford has traditionally prided ourselves in obviously having small classroom sizes, but it can be evaluated. I know that specific cohorts have very increased needs against other cohorts, and we try to ensure that we could provide the best service for our students. And those smaller class sizes obviously are something that we continue to pride ourselves on and want to have so that students can continue their path for success. As you know, when you collapse a group of students and then you put them into only 3 classrooms, you only have so many options for classroom placements. And sometimes when we've been with the same friends for many, many years in our career, we need a little separation as well. So it certainly can be something that's looked at. I'll be frank with you, it's probably not the first thing that we're going to look at, but it can be something that will be evaluated just as everything else is on the questions and responses.
And I would prefer it as a last resort as well, but
Yeah.
just looking at the numbers.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. Yep. I mean, thank you, Eric, not Frank.
Can I just confirm for the minutes that you both suggest to cut the security to keep the teachers?
So on the grants that we're not getting next year, have you considered letting those people go that are employed by those grants? Did that come out right? I don't know.
Kind of. So the grants that are currently scheduled for next year, I'll give you one example.
Like the
There's
read-
one in
the
there
read-
for a
read one.
behavioral health, or I'll give you the specific name of it. So the grant-funded position that currently exists and that is in next year's budget, because it is grant-funded, is the ARPA School Mental Health Specialist at $52,000. That position, when not funded, would be something that we would consider not continuing because it's not grant-funded.
Okay.
So based on today's discussion, real life time, March 4th, that would be the recommendation for that particular thing. We're not looking to continue to add positions that are not grant funded. If the Board of Ed does not support that, obviously it would come up for discussion. We would discuss what the purpose of the position is before making that decision.
But I was looking just on page 11 under regular education, the behavioral health grant and the small town right to read grant. I assume we hire paras or some type of teaching person?
No, that's a great question, Penny. Those were for material specifically
Okay.
only, not for positions or personnel whatsoever. So that came with professional development, but that's not a person that we're retaining on staff. So it was more focused on professional development and materials to get our classrooms up and running with all of the things that we needed to do to get a more impactful, more engaging literacy component here, which we've selected EL education and are continuing to have great feedback from and great results.
So then where does that money then come from if we are not getting those grants?
Yep. So after we're up and running, based on meeting with the team and talking, it was looking like, I want to say an average of 20, I'm giving the number in average $23,000 for continuous improvement of instruction, or it's under regular education. So that would be $23,000 for specific item there versus the 40,000 plus that we had received prior to. So now that we have materials up and running, now these are the consumable costs year after year for students to have the materials in front of them that they can have. So those are typically workbooks and things of that nature.
But they're no longer grant funded.
That is correct.
So that has to come out of our regular budget money,
Correct.
correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So is it possible for you to tell us for next week on those grants that employ people, if we aren't getting those grants and we didn't have those people, how much?
There are none right now except for the one I just pointed out.
Okay,
So I could answer that now. We
Okay.
have one individual that is grant funded at $52,000.
okay.
The others
But
are,
that grant is still, is that grant planned for next year? or
yep,
is-
yep, yes, sir. Yep,
So we
on
have
page
one grant.
5.
So that $52,000, that one individual's grant funded, but the grant is still in place. for
That is
26,
correct.
27 school year.
No, 25, 26
I'm
school year,
sorry,
not
25.
26, 27.
25, 26 school year.
All the rest are not connected to an individual hired on a grant.
And they're currently
Basis.
employed under that same grant. under the
Correct.
20
Yes, yes, sir.
24, 25.
Yes, same exact grant.
Jeff, when
So I
you,
think that came up as well in
Yeah.
other conversations. So again, right now, just to summarize what I just heard is we only have one individual who's employed and paid for by a grant currently.
Correct,
And will be in the next year, but it's also the grant didn't go away. We still have the grant.
correct.
And just with all these grants, the conversations that Jeff and I have had, we have obligations to prove out that we are using these grants for
Mhm.
the intended purpose of the grant.
Yep.
And so in no way could we take that and use it to pay for other reasons.
That is correct.
Jeff,
oh, sorry, oh, go ahead. When we get money from a grant for a particular position, do we have obviously you have the conversation with them that this is a grant funded position. It's not a guaranteed position forever, right? You have that conversation?
Yep,
So the
before we
expect-
even apply for the grant, we have a
You have a
conversation.
conversation.
Yeah, we're talking about it. What is the impact? Is it worth pursuing this grant?
Okay.
What is it going to do? How long does it last? How are we going to implement it if we receive it? And then are we going to be able to support the need for it to continue? Or are we really, it's just a temporary stopgap?
So they understand
Oh, yeah,
the
yeah.
ramifications of.
Yeah, our staff understands that wholeheartedly, fully. Yep. Yes, sir, Tim.
if we do remove the security officer, the money in the non-lapsing account, is there anything we can pay forward right now in order to decrease the budget for next year?
So would we, my recommendation there would be to take 1 year at a time, finish this fiscal year, these books, wrap them up. So if we're at $50,000 to $60,000 in deficit this year, if we're over, utilizing money from the non-lapsing account. Our auditor should be completed with their report very shortly, so then we'll know what additional amounts can go in there, and that would be revisited after the fact. Otherwise, we're starting to mix different cycles together. That'd be my recommendation to the board.
We typically, again, that's a conversation with the Board of Finance as well, when we do those types of things. And typically, you don't want to use those funds to offset the current year, because you're offsetting the year, but you're going to have the same problem the following year. Right? Again, knowing that other things may not, again, outplacements may come down or whatnot, but, that would be another conversation with the Board of Finance before we could rely on that decision. Right?
How much money is in that non-lapsing account now? There's 100 and.
115,000 approximately. I don't
How
have the
much?
sheet. $115,000 approximately.
And that includes the,
It's the original we put in there, and then another 15,000 from the 23,
324, yeah.
23.
but that doesn't include the money that we set aside last year.
Correct.
For the security guard.
Great. That's what's in there currently until we have met with our auditors and have a final number. That's what's in there currently right now.
24, 25, I believe, at your Board of Finance meeting, they're going to present the audit
Right,
coming up.
Mhm.
So
on
we
the
haven't seen that.
18th.
Yeah, so we haven't seen that.
So the 70,000 that we set aside for this current year for that security guard is now sitting in our bank account? It's not in the non-lapsing. Can it be used for that $50,000 that we're in the hole for?
Not yet. That money's not in the,
I mean, if you ask permission, can it be used for
no,
that?
it's not permission. It's not permission oriented. That's Board of Education driven first and foremost. Those two amounts are not combined as of yet. There is $115,000 sitting in a non-lapsing account that the Board of Education has the authority to utilize. So that would be, in my mind, the correct path to offset any costs that are over this year. Then, after the audit is completed, which should be within a couple of weeks, we will know the additional amount of money that the Board of Education has that was not expended during the 23-24 school year, which would augment or add to that $115,000.
Okay.
Any further questions or comments? Would anybody like to make a motion?
So just so I understand this, if we make a motion now, then we're going to come back together next Tuesday. And,
The idea would be
and try
that,
and finalize this budget?
the idea would be that if we give direction, again, Tom and Tim had made some recommendations here, or their thoughts. If we give a direction on a percentage to our superintendent, or we give a dollar value to our superintendent, we've had the conversation that he will review the budget, the cuts that are least impactful to our educational system with the administration, and he would target having us that list by Friday,
This coming Friday.
this coming Friday. Is that correct?
Yes, it'll also afford me the opportunity to talk to individuals if we're talking about staff reduction, which I would plead for the board to let me have that time, because that's person to person, heart to heart.
Right.
That's very critical for me to do.
That would then give us the weekend and Monday and Tuesday in preparation for our Tuesday meeting to gather our questions or our thoughts related to the cuts to get to, again, if we choose as a board to go with 5.55 and 4.5, or we decide to go with a value, it'll give us the opportunity to review what is being recommended by our superintendent prior to that meeting.
Don't you have to present this budget to the Board of Finance next Tuesday?
No, that would be Saturday morning, March
This
15th
Saturday?
at 9
Okay.
o'clock.
All right.
I mean, I'll make a motion that we direct Superintendent Sousa to give us a proposed budget at 3 different intervals for consideration at 5, 4.5, and 4%.
Can you say those percentage against, please?
5, 4.5, and 4.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. We have a motion by Tom. We have a second by Tim. Is there any discussion on that?
Well, just for What do you think about back with three different numbers? Would it be easier just to go for one number, or, I know obviously it would be, but
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts are irrelevant, right? Specifically to this, because if I could present different scenarios that the board could have full understanding of the cuts and impacts, it allows for better understanding of the delivery. So I'm not opposed to 2 or 3. Outside of that, I think it would be a little bit much. But 2 or 3 different projections or goals or targets that we should be looking at is acceptable for the board to be able to consider, in my opinion. I could do that.
So, again, what you'll do, Jeff, is, right, you'll give us a list of recommendations to get us to, in this scenario, a 5%. What additional would be needed to get us to the 4.5 and again to the 4?
Correct.
Based on a 7.6 contractual, I'd like to start with the 5.5. All right, that's taken over 2% out of our educational system, right off the top.
I would agree, and I would even go higher if I could. Because my question is, what if he can't? What if he's unable to get down to that 5%?
If you look back at the historical budget data, I mean, there's very few times that we were in the 4% range. We were once at 5.27 way back in 2006. I mean, that's going back 20 years. But most of them are 3% or under, or 3.89 and under. I don't think 5.5% is realistic. I'd rather start at 5 and go down.
I think the challenge is that is this your first budget cycle?
Yes.
And you're first, right? Second. So, I mean, you guys remember what happened last year, right? Jeff came to us with an 8 what was it?
809.
Right. So basically came to us with almost this, well, no, it was less than what he came to us this year. So we had to we spent a lot of time going back and forth. And when, I mean, we had to take it to the Board of Finance and we already, they're doing their job, right? Like, we're not going to get it passed. Nothing is going to get passed at 6, 7. It's not going to get passed. They're going to just send it back here, which they should. They should. I mean, you have people in New Hartford that are struggling to pay their electric bills right now. We're the second largest electric rate. We literally are second in the country next to Hawaii. I know neighbors that can't pay their electric bill right now, and it's horrible. This whole situation is horrific. I've been sick all week looking at this budget because we don't want to cut people, right? We don't want to cut teachers. We don't want to cut it. But unfortunately, the reality of our situation is we cannot go to the Board of Finance with an 8, 7, right, Penny? Penny's been on here the longest time, and Tom. They're going to send it right back. You're going to be here at midnight working through the numbers and you have to cut. You can't, it's not going to work. So we're saying, we're saying start at 5, 4, 4.5, because that's where you're going to have to end up being. That's the reality. It's a really shitty situation, but the Board of Finance is doing their job and it's not a good situation for anybody. So I don't want to waste Jeff's time and say, Jeff, I was going to come and say, show me what 7, 6, 5, 4, and 3 look like. Well, that's a waste of time. That's a waste of time for
I think
him.
he's going to get there. Again, if you're saying that you've got to get down to 4, right? He's going to be going through this
Right.
process.
Got to
anyhow.
go through that process.
I'm saying that, again, with a 7.6% contractual, if you start at 5.5, that's what I'd like to see. Start at the 5.5. Again, getting down to 4. Again, this is a problem across the state, right? And again, if you read across the state right now, the average is 5% across the state being adopted, right? There's school districts that are up at 12, right, or higher. So, we have needs within our school that we have to provide services to, right? If we don't provide these services, we had the same conversation last year. Outplacements far exceed the cost of keeping our staff. So again, I mean, we have a motion on the floor. We can vote on that motion. Again, Tom, if you would be willing to amend the motion, we can do that.
Can I make one comment?
Absolutely.
it's not only the Board of Finance that has to approve this, it's the townspeople that when they go to referendum, they're going to vote on this. If they vote it down, that means having to go back and Jeff's going to have to redo this all over again. And it's going to have to go back to referendum, which is another cost that this town really can't afford because it costs a lot of money to have poll workers working for those few hours for the very few people that come out and vote on it. And it's not only people that can't afford the food, people can't afford the heat or the electricity in this town. They are struggling. We have no businesses to help us. No commercial businesses. We're mostly all townspeople. And a lot of them are old.
I picked my numbers based on, I originally was gonna start at 5.5, but listen to Tim, and I just don't think 5.5 is gonna cut it, so I just don't wanna waste my time with it, that's all. That's why I started at 5.
I think it's good.
Precedent is 5.27, maybe 5.25, 5.25.
Again, we're not going to make the decision until next week.
We just have to give Jeff direction of what we
Right.
want him to do. So we have to settle on a
We're giving them
number.
stopping points.
We have to give him a stopping point so he knows what to do. Just know, those of you that are new, that we're literally going to be back here and time again, because it's not going to pass. It's not going to pass. It's a really horrible situation for everybody, everybody involved. It's not going to pass. You're going to be back here.
And the Board of Finance won't come back and say you have to they will only tell us that we have to cut X amount of dollars.
Right.
They won't say which line item or, anything like that. It's money.
When they vote on the budget, are they voting on the entire town budget or are they voting specifically on the education budget?
We're a line on the edge. We're a line item. So
Okay.
They vote them separately.
Don't we get put in with the town?
No, we put them in the town and the region.
I'm sorry, yes, Region 7, I'm sorry, Region 7 separate.
So if we ask for a higher percentage, does that give the Board of Finance or any other section of the town an idea to lower their percentages? I mean, can we cut elsewhere besides education? I mean, that's gonna happen, but
No, the only other place you can cut would be the town.
Right. Well, that's, I think, what Eric's
right,
asking.
so
Right, and
we're
again,
only,
yes,
we're
they-
only a small portion of the budget.
We're a
So,
big portion.
well,
of
okay,
the
fine,
budget.
we're still a
Education
portion
is-
of the
is
budget.
Most of the budget.
Okay, we're a portion of the budget, so can we work with the town to get other things cut?
That's up to Jeff to work with First Selectman Jerem.
Okay.
And I mean, the chairperson of the Board of Finance, from her board, if they say to her, go to Region 7 and tell Region 7 that however much he's asking for is too much, then she will write a letter to them saying, we need you to cut your budget. Most of the time, they do not do it. They just read that letter and laugh at us.
What I keep coming back to is the per pupil expenditure and the fact that we are the lowest.
I mean, the reality of the situation, Eric, is that we can't really do anything about special education. We can't do anything about transportation. We can't do anything about teacher salaries and the benefits. That's 7.6% currently.
Right.
So, I mean.
So if you want 5%, we've got to cut out of there.
I know, and that's the unfortunate, again, I just want to put it on record. I don't want to cut anybody, and this is, again, I'm not here to cut people and destroy lives. That's not my intent here. I want us to have an excess of people that we need for our children. That's really why we're all sitting here tonight. But unfortunately, we have to make hard decisions. We're in so much debt as a nation. We're in so much debt we're debt everywhere. Right. And it's all filtering down to the local level. There's no money. So either we have to come up, which I've said every single year, if we can't get funding from the taxpayers, which we cannot go back to the taxpayers who are struggling to pay their electric bills, who are struggling to buy food, who are struggling to pay their rent, and ask them to do an 8.37, whatever it is, increase in their taxes. We just can't. It's not fiscally responsible. So if we can't do that, then what are our other options to fundraise, like do things differently than school districts have ever done before? I keep saying this. What can we do to fundraise? What can we do to do annual giving? I don't even know, but there's other options to bring funding into the school systems to fund some of this stuff. I think we have to start getting creative. I've said it for, I don't even know how many years I've been on the board now. I keep saying the same thing, right? Every single year. Where can we find other funding that is not tied to grants at the federal and state level, that is not tied to the taxpayers? There's got to be a way to do it.
What you're arguing for, Eric, right now is the same thing I went through last year, like very hard on that, not wanting to get rid of anybody. And it's an impossibility when we're trying to get a budget under 5, and it's not going to be accepted otherwise.
And honestly, the board of finance shouldn't. I mean, they wouldn't be doing their job if they said, "Go ahead, just pass the 8.34 or whatever." Isn't that-
8.86.
Yeah, they're not doing their job either. They're not being fiscally responsible at all. It's just not fiscally responsible. So they're doing their job. I know it sounds like it's a horrible thing, but
One thing, this is long-term. We need to focus on this budget, but at some point, we're going to we have a high percentage of students that are in special ed compared to other towns. And we have to systemically look at, is there anything that we are doing that is driving that? I see it at the high school too. And it's something that needs to be looked at because it's the big driver of cost, obviously. It's not going to happen in this budget year, but it's going to keep happening. It's going to keep growing if we don't address that.
Yeah, and I would say that our special ed percentage right now is probably lower than all of the other regions surrounding us. Mike can give us more specific percentages based on what's, again, reported to the state. 23, 24, 25 numbers are not out, but and in all of my years in education, I have never seen it go the other way. This is a trend across Connecticut, the United States, that continues to increase. There's a lot of reasons why, based, identification, assessment of students, providing services for children, the law that protects students that need the services that they receive. There are many reasons why. I could not predict with any certainty that I would bet dollars to donuts, because I love donuts, that it's not going to ever trend the other way. It does not appear such. When I started in education, it was at 9%. We're at approximately 18, 19, 20%, depending where you want to look in the state of Connecticut and across the United States. I know it's a systemic issue. It forces districts to look to help one another. I know there's incentives at the state level as well coming up this year. It's in the proposed budget to help districts form programs together so that you don't have as many outplacements, or that you can better control the costs, put control into quotations. It's worth something to explore for sure. But that's what it's really looking like. We're left with multiple towns and districts trying to figure this out and try to help one another, utilizing some of the state aid. Hopefully that comes through. We'll see when that gets there. But again, I've not seen it trend the other way ever in my career, ever. And
Jeff, do you
this is
have-
the reality of what it is.
That's what I'm saying.
I know,
And
I know.
and I don't, and it's a big question, but I do wonder if there aren't things we can do with interventions that prevent it. Every kid, I think, that goes in that direction doesn't have to. And
We definitely do that, Frank. I guarantee that. We have an MTSS process that's very finite, very focused, very analytical. And we also have celebration stories where we had, 5 students exit special ed this year. These are great things that we're going to continue to celebrate, but we take a very careful look. And then sometimes we bring students to evaluation and they don't qualify. I would say there's probably a half dozen students already this year that have not. So it's not just, it's an easy process. It's a flaw in our system. It is certainly not. We are very careful with that, and we exit students as quickly as we can, and we decrease services as quickly as we can based on our progress monitoring and based on our annual goals and their assessments. We're getting kids in and out. It is not meant to be a lifetime sentence. We don't want that. We want students to get the support that they need in real time. And typically in elementary school, they are higher because we're identifying them and noticing this is a learning disability. We need to address it now. And hopefully by the time they go to regional, they don't need that support anymore. That's one of our biggest goals and points of pride that we have in New Hartford. So we are looking at it, Frank. We always look at it very, very carefully.
Going back to what Frank said about incentivizing retirement, I think that's a great idea. Do you know how many teachers there are that are even in that age bracket to
No.
retire? No.
No, I don't have that number off the top of my head. Philosophically, I have a challenge with it because if you offer it to one, then how long are you offering it? What type of agreement are we getting into? And I want to keep the board out of any liability for discriminatory practices if we don't have an agreement that is legally covering the Board of Education. I would be leery of that. I think it's a good idea, but philosophically, I have struggles getting through the point where we could do it and there won't be repercussions.
It has to have been done.
That's my
before,
worry.
though, right? Like not here.
Not
obviously,
here,
but-
yeah. I'd have to do a lot of research to feel confident to propose something like that, and feel confident that it would work and that we would be protected.
Jeff, do you have the numbers that I asked you last year
Of-
for the special ed for like the last 10 years in the budget, how much it's gone up? Remember we
I
did it
present,
last year?
yeah, I had that chart. I could update it and I could have it
Can you
presented
just
for
add
next
it-
week.
Just add it for next week?
Yeah, we have a rolling
I know
number.
I made you do it last year.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor by Tom for Jeff to bring back to us items that he would recommend with the least impact to our educational system to get to 5%, 4.5%, 4%. That was seconded by Tim. Any further discussion on that?
I just wanted to say one more thing about that. I think 4 is way deep. I have a feeling it's going to be way deep, but I wanted that out there so that people can actually see, it's easy to say, oh, it doesn't make it 4. Well, I want people to see what that means when they actually see what the 4 is, rather than saying, oh, make it 4. If you can go to 4.5, we can go to 4. No, let's look at what 4 really means, which is why I wanted to go down to that number. And I don't think that's the real number, but I think we should look at what that really means to this district.
When we take this vote, can I vote yes and still want to see a higher percentage, like 5.5, like you were saying, or do I vote no for that?
Put a motion on the floor.
A separate motion?
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Can you repeat the motion again?
There's a motion for Superintendent Sousa to bring back recommended cuts to the budget that will be the least impactful to our educational system to get to a 5%, a 4.5%, and a 4% budget. All those in favor? All those opposed? Abstentions? Okay, that's 801. Do we have any further motions?
Yeah. No, it's seven.
I'm sorry, 701. There's only 8 of us here. Yep.
No, 6. Who's the 8?
Eric abstained.
3, 4, 5, 6. It's 6. This person's not here.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
I always forget your count. It should be here. Sorry. 7. Sorry.
Any further motions? I'll make the motion. I'd like to see where 5.5 gets us. Again, and that's, I'll make that motion to see where 5.5 gets us. If I get a second, we can discuss.
Second.
Okay, so we got a 5.5 motion by the chair, second by Eric. Again, to me, right, we are here, we are on this board to serve the educational interest of this town. I understand that the budget is high. Again, I think that there are going to be some very detrimental cuts to bring this down. Even getting it down 2.1% is going to be a very large, impactful change to the educational system in New Hartford. So to me, I'd like to see where we are. Again, it doesn't mean we have to stay there. And we'll make the decision next Tuesday, but I'd like to see those incremental changes to the budget. Any further discussion on that?
You okay with that, Jeff? That's a 4th one.
Irrelevant, right? I don't have voting power, so I am at the service of the board. So as the board directs me, I shall go. That's a difficult question to
I have
answer.
one more thing that just came into my mind besides the incentivizing retirement as you get creative. Have you ever asked, surveyed staff to see if anybody has an interest in maybe being part-time?
Not just part-time, but what your future plans are and how we can help you achieve those goals. But not part-time.
Okay.
Any additional?
I'm not sure I'm not sure incentivizing retirement would necessarily affect the budget. It would just more affect student-teacher ratio. Am I correct with that?
Depends on the position that we're incentivizing.
Okay.
Because if it's classroom teacher, that impacts the ratio specifically. If not, then we're looking at supported and related staff
Okay.
for students.
Thank you.
No, we'd have to be prepared to reduce the classroom size, right?
That
Or
would,
we
in
gotta
that
backfill
scenario,
it.
yeah.
Or we got to backfill the position. So.
Yep.
Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor? Those opposed? All right. So that's, what do we got? 7-1-0. All right, any further discussion on the 25-26 budget, proposed budget by the superintendent? Looks like you got your work cut out for you. All right. We will move on to the next item, H, public comment for agenda items only. Would anybody like to address the board? Lou, come on up, please. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved at 6:06.
Second.
So 6,
Go girls at Region
Penny,
7.
Tim, yes, there's a game tonight. We are adjourned at 6:06. Thank you.
You can't go up, go home and watch
Hey.
it.
I want to make sure that